At the same time, education must be prioritized, we are told, in this year's budget speech. And that's the call from South Africa's biggest teacher union. For more, I'm joined by Sadtu's General Secretary, Mugwena Maluleke. So, Mr. Maluleke, I suspect that the reality on the ground that's leading you to making this call is that as much as education is one of the big line items every year in as far as the budget is concerned, it's simply not commensurate with the realities that we face in the education sector. Is that why you are making the call?
Good day, Tulasizwe, and to the viewers at home. You are right. The realities on the ground are dictating that we cannot go back to pre-COVID conditions, because we have seen how devastated our communities and our schools are. We are seated with a situation where in the Eastern Cape, there are no learning support material. There are no ablution facilities. There are no clean water for our schools. We are seated in a situation in Limpopo itself. The learners don't have desks as it is now because they have got to be cramped in one class. The so-called mobile classroom have not been delivered over a period of 3 years since we started with this particular pandemic. They have nothing that has been delivered. It's so disheartening to see what is happening in Gauteng, where a school will be requiring about additional 12 teachers because of the enrollment that they have. However, the department is saying, look, we can only afford 2 out of 12. That means that the teachers are being overloaded. The learners are not receiving the quality education they're supposed to receive because of the budget cuts. You cannot have austerity measures on education at all, because for you to have an economic recovery, you need to be able to invest in education so that you are then able to produce the skills that is necessary for you to increase your revenue collection and revenue generation as a country. So it has to be commensurate with what is happening on the ground. But really, it is quite disheartening to see what is happening in our schools.
So part of what government has been trying to do in trying to regain control of our finances has been to sort of control spending in that, you know, we basically, if it does increase, it's rather gradual and aimed at specific programs that are meant to assist with economic growth and certain programs such as the response to COVID-19, but at the same time trying to ensure that the debt situation doesn't get out of hand as we speak. It stands at well over 80% of GDP, our debt situation, and what we spend in debt service costs now is basically bigger than certain items within the, you know, the socio-economic needs of our country. In terms of government trying to do that, how is it manifested within the, let's say, the basic education sector? What in reality has happened?
What that has really caused, it has caused a situation where basically we're dealing with the mental health of learners who really are sharing a desk being full, and therefore not having individual attention, because where you lack the teachers to be in the classroom, you're not going to be able to do that. We have seen the situation that mobile classrooms cannot be delivered precisely because of the shifting of the budget to this particular line item and so forth. But Tula says that the problem in the country, it is that you have got so many departments, and each and every department is owning their own budget. There is no time where as a country we say we need 3 priorities. 1, education. 2, infrastructure to create employment. Because once you're able to deal with infrastructure and deal with educational issues, you address the health problems, because people are aware, they are able to take care of themselves and so forth, and you've been able to do that. But if the 28 or whatever number of ministers, every one of them says, this is my budget, and so we don't see the impact of the budget in South Africa precisely because it doesn't change. Every year is going to be the same. I think the minister is going to also be saying that it is time for them to really synergize. It's the time for them to collaborate and be able to reduce the number of, you know, line items that are not necessary, and focus on the line items that are going to create employment in terms of economic growth. Without economic growth, you're not going to be able to deal with this issue. But education is at the top of each and everything that you want to do, because really the impact we are seeing is so huge. Our learners have lost much time. Instead of them, all of a sudden not having teachers, we need to have them have teachers because they've lost time.
So part of the conversation about structural reforms in the economy includes talk about bringing the public sector wage bill under control. It's one of those that are always touted, and government had a target of some 230 billion rand in savings over a period of 2 years, starting in late 2020 into 2021. Within education itself, I imagine that you will say that there's simply no room to realize that through cuts in terms of employment of teachers and other workers within the basic education sector?
Definitely. You cannot cut the teachers. You cannot cut the people who are supposed to be assisting the teachers themselves, because therefore, basically what you are saying is that you're not going to have an economic recovery. Two, you're not going to have a peaceful social existence, because any austerity measures in education would lead to drop out of our children. And as they drop out, they also join other activities that you don't want them to be joining. And therefore, you need a political stability. You need to have investor-friendly country. And for you to do that, they look at education. Everybody would look at education and say, what is education doing? Is the education really going to be able to provide the basis for us to coexist, no violence, and therefore can invest our money? So there is no room for that at the end of the day, because clearly it is that even in our hospitals, you cannot believe the queues that are there. You cannot believe that you travel to a clinic and then you cannot have a Panado. So that particular cutting of the spending is a wrong formula that is really advocated by rating agencies and advocated by the IMF. It doesn't work in a developing country. You've got to increase the deficit. There's no way you can do that. Other countries are at about 136% of the GDP, precisely because they need to invest. So we are still at 80%. So clearly our argument economically is that South Africa still has got to do more, because we are a developing country. We cannot compare ourselves with developed countries in terms of why we're supposed to be managing and tracing and chasing this particular deficit, because we need social spending for us to have stability in our country.
Lastly, Mr. Maluleke, talk to me about the realities of returning to full-time learning within basic education. This is a recent development within the context where, the COVID-19 situation does continue to exist, but, pupils now need to return to the classrooms given some of the losses in as far as education is concerned. What would Enoch Godongwana do that would assist in that regard?
Well, the damage that has been caused by this loss of time is imaginable. It's so immeasurable. It's a generational catastrophe. So we would want to hear Minister Godongwana really saying this is a relief fund that is set aside for education. One, to be able for us to have the desks that the learners that have returned, all of them don't have now. And then two, it is that we need to continue to be having the PPEs that we don't have for now, because social distance has been taken away, and therefore the only way to be able to stop the transmissions there is to making sure that we have quality masks, we have got sanitizers in our schools, and therefore we are calling for a financial relief, which we can call a school disaster financial relief, which is aimed really at dealing with the devastation of the pandemic, but also recognizing that education infrastructure in the country is stubborn because it's an old problem, and therefore we've got to address it once and for all. Yes, you cannot build Rome in one day. However, it cannot be that education can be the last in any country, because the mirror for the economy is education.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights. Let's see how much of what you're hoping for manifests when Enoch Godongwana takes to the podium at the Good Hope Chamber in Parliament there, this afternoon at 2 p.m. That is Mugwena Maluleke there, who is General Secretary of the South African Democratic Teachers Union, weighing in on their expectations ahead of Budget 2022.